Hare Krishna. Thank you again so much for giving me this opportunity to speak about one of our glorious acharyas in our line. Very happy to have this opportunity. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskacha Desatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Vanchikopatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, today we will speak about one amazing personality, an associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his name is Murari Gupta. So Murari Gupta, I have to say that he holds a special place in my heart, along with Sri Vrindavan Das Thakur, because the two of them, they wrote more specifically about the youthful pastimes of Mahaprabhu. And those pastimes, to me, they're just most charming and captivating pastimes, and they reveal, I feel, the personality and the character of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in such a special and unique way. And, you know, you think of these personalities who actually witnessed from the very early days of Mahaprabhu's birth, that they were there the whole time. There's only, you know, not so many associates that were always there, like all of the six Goswamis. None of them saw these early pastimes. But Murari Gupta, he was there. So he could tell the stories of Nimai being, you know, a naughty young boy and teasing and playing with his associates, and all the while none of them knew at all who he was. And, you know, those pastimes as, you know, the arrogant and the proud scholar and teacher, it's just so interesting how he orchestrated his transcendental Leela and staying hidden for so long, and then, you know, sort of playing with his associates, hiding himself from them, and then gradually, you know, in stages, you know, revealing himself to each one in his own way. It's just a very, very amazing to watch this wonderful, you know, God's play. I mean, that's what it is, you know, the Leela, it's God playing. And I remember, you know, as a young person being kind of bored with the religious ideas that, you know, God is this fearful guy in the sky that will punish us if we're bad. I mean, how do you love somebody like that? And then, you know, I wondered, well, why do we have to always be good, you know? Why can't we play and have fun? And I didn't feel so attracted. And even, I think it's Nietzsche said, I would only believe in a God who could dance. So, yeah, we've got a God that dances. And that's Gauranga Mahaprabhu, the most charming. He plays tricks, he's arrogant, he does naughty things. And there's just nothing boring about Mahaprabhu and his associates. And this is so apparent from his pastimes, especially before his sannyas Leela. So, you know, these pastimes, they're not just appealing, but they're very, very relevant for us for everyone in this mission of his, because Srila Prabhupada said we worship Mahaprabhu in reverence as a Gridhasta, just like we worship Radha and Krishna as Lakshmi Narayan. You know, understanding that first we become a servant, and through Mahaprabhu, and through becoming a servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then everything else will unfold. So this is our first focus and meditation, is on Gauranga Mahaprabhu in this time, in this youthful time, which is so beautiful. And so we have Murari Gupta and Vrindavan Das Thakur to thank for giving us a window into that world of young Nimai. Not that Krishnadas Kaviraj doesn't cover, but it's more elaborately described by them. And then, other biographers took use of these original works of Murari Gupta. And his book is called Sri Chaitanya Charita Mahakavya, also known as Murari's Kadacha, or his personal notebook. And many biographers like Lochan Das Thakur and Kavi Karnapur and others, they use this as a source of information in order to elaborate on in their own ways. And so this Mahakavya, this great poem in Sanskrit, it's written in the style of the Puranas, with the flow of topics that are conveyed in a conversation between two pure devotees, Murari Gupta and Damodar Pandit. I'll try to, if we have time, just read a few excerpts from that book so that we get a sense of the kind of writing of Murari Gupta, what he sounds like in his writing. So, just to begin, I really want us to absorb the fact that we owe a very big debt to Murari Gupta and Vrindavan Das Thakur. If they did not write this, how would we know? It's an immeasurable debt. And they took the time and the effort to write so that we could relish and we could understand and we could become attached to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his mission. And it's just very important, I feel so important, to know who we are indebted to. If you owe somebody $1 million, well, you should know who is that person. Otherwise, how are you going to pay them back? So we have no capacity to pay back our acharyas for what they've given us. But still, some effort, at least acknowledgement, has to be there that I'm so grateful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So this acknowledgement and mood of gratitude, it's just totally essential for spiritual growth. And that is why we have like systems of etiquette in Vaishnava culture. Why we offer prayers before reading Shastra, or, we're supposed to show respect to parents, ancestors, brahmanas, gurus, demigods, God himself. Why we address people in different ways, respectful ways, Prabhu, Mr., Sir, Madam, every culture has some way, addresses, and why we have a hierarchical structure. It's just to create a culture of respect and appreciation, because it's essential for growth. Because, that is, Vaishnava culture is designed to assist us in showing gratitude, to create, constantly be creating the awareness of the gifts that we've been given, to help us remember all the time, because we forget, as Kanistas, at least for myself, Kanista, a lot of society is generally Kanistas, and the tendency of Kanistas is to whinge and to complain, or to carry some of their bad habits from the past into their spiritual pursuits. And we have to work on changing that, So that's why Vaishnava culture, there's an etiquette. It's it's purposefully designed to change our attitudes. It's really not for stifling us or as a means to overlord us. Of course, we know any system can be horribly misused and abused, and it has been, but you can't throw out the culture, It just has to be understood in the proper light, to help us to develop a sense of gratitude for everything that we have, whether it be, parents who gave us a body that we use and the teachers who've guided us, or the authors who have enlightened us. If we're not aware of the gifts we have been given, how can we properly open those gifts and even utilize them? So without acknowledgement and gratitude, we may develop a false sense of entitlement. This happens as if we deserve all that we have. Even we haven't been given enough. Entitlement, it's not the attitude of Vaishnava at all. It's like, being a spoiled child, Nobody likes a spoiled brat. But, it does take time to become, a cultured human being. But without making that effort, we may not be much more than, growling animals, even in dhotis and saris. So it's important. And Murari Gupta is one that we must really bow down to and thank. He served in all the Nadia pastimes. And there's just so much to learn from his interactions with Nimai. Many, many life lessons are there. And in his early life, Murari was born in a family of Ayurvedic physicians. His parents are not known, their names are not known, but they know that he was from Sailet or Srihata. Many devotees are from Srihata. Srivas, Chandrasekhar Acharya, Advaitacharya, I think even Jagannath Mishra was there before. It's like a very historical place, Srihata. It's mentioned in the Puranas and Mahabharata. So interesting how so many devotees took birth in this particular place. And then they all migrated, not all together, but, somehow or another, for one reason or another, they all moved to Navadvip. So Murari Gupta's family moved right near the home of Jagannath Mishra. It's like literally right behind his house. So he was a few years older, I'm not sure exactly the age, but he was a few years older and living in the same neighborhood. So he was a companion in the childhood pastimes. And they went to school together as students. They went to school at Gangadas Pandit's Toll. And although Murari was a few classes ahead, Nimai often engaged Murari Gupta in mock debates. And although Murari was senior, but he always would lose those debates. And they would wind up having these like heated debates and wind up pushing each other and scuffling down to the Ganges, pushing each other and then fighting in the water, and they'd stir up the mud, and the ladies couldn't fill up their pots because of mud, and brahmanas couldn't take their baths properly. So, they had fun together. And Murari Gupta was like, this kid is just annoying. But he was so amazed at at his wonderful intelligence, you know. How is it possible that this young boy knows so much? So he was very intrigued. And, you know, at one time, they were talking and arguing, debating. It'd be so interesting to hear what did they debate about, you know, how did they talk. But one time Nimai was really pleased with Murari Gupta's explanations, and so he just touched him. And when he touched Murari, his whole body just filled with ecstasy, like he was just overwhelmed completely. And he was just shocked. You know, who is he? He cannot be an ordinary human being. And then on another occasion, you know, Murari by this time, from quite young people, you know, these students were already engaged in their occupations. So Murari was already a doctor, and he was scholarly, and he was walking with his friends and discussing the yoga shastras. And Nimai and his friends were walking behind. And Nimai started mimicking and making fun of the way Murari Gupta was speaking. And Murari Gupta's like, oh, this annoying. He saw out of the corner of his eye what Nimai was doing, but he just ignored him. And so Nimai increased his mocking and started imitating the way Murari Gupta's walking and his hand gestures. And finally, Murari was just so angry, he just turned around and started rebuking him. And he was like, you know, you're supposed to be a Brahmin boy, you're just so ill-behaved. And then Nimai got angry back at him. And, you know, with his eyebrows knitted, he said, well, when you take your meal, I'll teach you something. And Murari was a little bewildered by that statement. He didn't know what is he talking about. So Murari just went home, and he just forgot about the incident. And then at noon, he sat down peacefully to take his meal. And meanwhile, Nimai had gone home. He got dressed in opulent garments. He wrapped a nice sash around his waist, and he tied his hair in a top knot, and he placed a string of tulsi beads and a strand of pearls around his neck, and he put kajal in his eyes, and he decorated his body with glistening golden ornaments. And then he went off to Murari Gupta's house, and he called out in a thunderous voice, Murari! And Murari was like really surprised. And then he remembered what Nimai had said earlier on. And so he said, you know, what are you doing here? And Nimai said, oh, don't get up. It's only I. Carry on with your meal. So then Murari Gupta kept eating, and Nimai slowly moved closer. And suddenly he began to pass urine on Murari's plate. And Murari Gupta jumped up. Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? Shame, shame, shame on you. This is our God. Nimai's clapping his hands and dancing gleefully. And then he turned to Murari and he said, giving up the path of bhakti, you have adopted the path of yoga. Give up karma and gyan and just worship Krishna with all your heart. Become a rasika bhakta, expert in tasting transcendental bliss. One who's attached to material things can't do Krishna bhajan, and his consciousness remains low and impure. Lord Hari is supremely merciful. Not only does he possess all powers, but he's the father of all souls, and from him the eternal Brahman is manifested. He is the treasure and the very life of the gopis of Vrindavan. Why don't you dedicate your life to worshiping him? After revealing really the essence of Braja Prem, Gaurahari suddenly vanished. And Murari was just shocked. Who is this boy who speaks with such commanding authority? Is he Krishna himself? How can he speak such profound philosophy at such a young age? And in his heart, Murari thought, Sachi's son, he's the Supreme Lord himself. And he was so overwhelmed by these thoughts, and his heart was just bursting with bliss. And he rushed to Advaitacharya's house, and he said to him, you know, this Nimai Pandit, he plays happily with his friends just like an ordinary boy. But I think he's totally transcendental to this material world. And hearing this, Advaitacharya's hair stood on end. He'd been seeing some signs also, and he's thinking, have my prayers been answered? I think that this is a great secret, that Nimai Pandit is the Supreme Lord. He's the reservoir of all rasas and the embodiment of transcendental beauty. And Advaita Acharya and Murari Gupta, they just joyfully embraced each other in this bliss of revelation. And yet, afterwards, they sort of forgot about it. Interesting. Because, you know, whatever Nimai wants us to know, that's what we know. If he wanted to keep his associates in the dark, then he can do so. But, you know, momentarily they would have these revelations, and things, you know, began to dawn on all of them slowly. Oh, this Nimai is not ordinary. Like Mukunda was another schoolmate, and he also used to debate and argue with Nimai, and he was also thinking, you know, I don't know who he is, but he is definitely worth taking shelter of. So, you know, this was going on amongst the associates. And then, of course, when Gauranga Mahaprabhu, when he returned from Gaya, then he was really a different person. And his arrogance was gone. And he was just like fully dedicated to humbly serving all the Vaishnavas. And he was just so now they see him as the most exalted Vaishnava. And Murari Gupta, he's watching all these changes from his youth and then getting a little older. And then, you know, this congregational chanting began in the house of Srivas. And gradually, the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they started to wake up, each, you know, according to the plan of the Lord, you know, as he wanted to unfold his mission. So Murari, by profession, he was a doctor. He came in a family of doctors, and he also became Ayurvedic doctor. And but he was a very, very special kind of doctor, that he would cure patients on all levels, body, mind, consciousness. He would purify their bodies through medicine and diet, and he'd purify their senses by giving them Mahaprasadam, and he would purify them mentally by his caring and loving and compassionate interactions. And he would purify their consciousness by giving the Maha Mantra. So for this, he was known as the king of doctors, the best doctor. He had this perfect formula. And really that's, you know, every Vaishnava can apply in any profession this formula. That our goal, you know, whatever we may be doing in the world, our goal in our interactions with anyone and everyone is to help cure the material disease in whatever way we can. And there was an interesting interaction with Srila Prabhupada and his godbrother, Obiel Kapoor. This was like when Prabhupada was in Allahabad in the 1930s. Obiel Kapoor was not well, and then Srila Prabhupada said, well, I have a tonic I can give you, because of course Prabhupada was working in pharmacy at that time. And so then Obiel Kapoor said, but I want the tonic that you take. And Prabhupada said, oh, what tonic? He said, I want that tonic, the one that gives love of God. And then Prabhupada said, oh, I don't have it, but I know the formula. And I'm going to preach it all over the world. This is in the 1930s. Prabhupada said, I know the formula, and I am going to preach it all over the world. And so then Obiel Kapoor said, well, is that a secret formula? Can you give it to me? And he said, no, it's not a secret. Trinadapi sunichena tororapi sahisnuna manina manadena kirtaniya sada hari. Beautiful, beautiful interaction there. So then Murari, as he's a doctor now, and he started to participate in the kirtans that began happening at Srivasangan. And Murari was a very expert singer and dancer, and he was especially he would chant Srimad Bhagavatam very melodiously. So he was known for that. And then one day at Srivasa's house, some remarkable, amazing, extraordinary pastime happened, which is referred to as the Mahaprakash Leela, which is something that went on for 21 hours. It's referred to as the Great Manifestation. And Lord Chaitanya wanted to show the world what real bhakti is through the example of his devotees. So he selected a few to reveal their hearts to the other devotees. So he called Sridhar, he called Haridas, he called Srivas one by one. And he showed each of them the form of the Lord that they loved. And he reminded them each of times when he had come to their rescue. And then he called out, Murari, so many days you couldn't tell who I was. Now look at me. So Murari looked at Lord Chaitanya, and what did he see? He saw Lord Ramachandra sitting in a heroic pose, holding a mighty bow, quiver, arrows, and his complexion was like Durba grass, and his eyes were beautiful lotus flowers, like lotus flowers. And Sita and Lakshman were on either side, and there was an army of monkeys surrounding, singing hymns of praise. And then he saw himself as a monkey amongst them. And then he just fell down in a faint. And Lord Chaitanya touched him and said, you have forgotten, but I'm reminding you. Don't you remember how you jumped over the ocean with your tail blazing and burned the city of Lanka? I am your beloved, Lord Ramachandra, and you are my beloved devotee, Hanuman. Amazing. For the purpose of Leela, the Lord sometimes covers his devotees from understanding who they really are. But ye yatamam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajami aham. As one surrenders, I reveal myself. So the Lord reveals himself in his own time, in his own way, and according to our desires and what we cultivate through our sadhana and our prayers. And that's how much we're allowed to see. So the Lord, touching Murari, and he woke him, and he said, I'm your beloved, and I want to fulfill any desire you have. Just ask for any benediction. So think about it. What would you ask? Dukalayam Ashasvatam, this place is full of miseries and challenges. But, Murari, he didn't ask to remove obstacles or get rid of the envious people around him or, Murari, he understood, I'm Hanuman. Hanuman. I have no other desire than to serve the Lord in any and every incarnation as his very humble servant. So Murari said, I don't want anything. I just want to serve you. Like Prahlad, he was also asked, he said, oh, I don't want to do any business with you, Lord. I don't want to ask for anything. But he said, if it pleases you to give me something, then what you could give me is that in every situation, in any birth, just allow me to always remember you with love. That was what he wanted. Always remember that I can always remember that you are my master and I am your servant. And allow me the association of those who sincerely and genuinely consider themselves your servants. And allow me to be the servant of your servants. This is all I desire. So, just let me forever chant your holy names. So this was his request. And when Lord Chaitanya heard this humble request, he began to cry. Not only he began to cry, but all the devotees around began to cry. And even the animals and the trees and even the stone would melt. That to see the power of Murari Gupta's devotion, it was overwhelming and heart-melting. And Lord Chaitanya said, Murari, the name Murari, that is Krishna. And Krishna himself is Gupta. So he is secretly living within your heart. And anyone who considers you an ordinary householder with an ordinary material occupation, he is most unfortunate. So, Murari Gupta, materially, he is not special. He was not a sannyasi. He was a family man doing his duty. And as Hanuman, he was a monkey. He didn't have any caste. So there's nothing prestigious about his birth. But his devotion lives forever in the hearts of all devotees. And, he appeared to be ordinary person to most ordinary people. But those who were blessed, they could see that he was topmost devotee. So appearance, it's really not everything. Really not everything at all. Appearances. Be careful about how we judge according to appearances. Mahaprabhu had all types of devotee associates, all varieties, rich and poor and all different castes and different occupations. I mean, Sridhar was a banana seller. And, so it's not easy to know who is who. We cannot tell externally. you know. There's really, there's no mold that everyone is supposed to fit into. You know, devotees may be from so many different situations, genders and occupations, but we have to appreciate each one individually according to the service attitude. Srila Prabhupada was just so expert like that. He had the ability to just look beyond the externals, and he could see wherever there was just even the tiniest spark of service attitude, he would just fan that spark. Like, you know, the guy that brought the toilet paper into, you know, one of the first temples. You know, he was a drunkard. And Prabhupada just said, just see, he's begun his service, you know. So a Vaishnava sees the service mood. That is really the yardstick by which to measure. It's just not body or position. And it's not easy. It's not easy to have such spiritual vision. It's really a blessing that's given. I was just listening a couple of days ago to an article, not listening, was it listening, or maybe it was on Dhanupads? I can't remember, but it was one black-bodied devotee who had grown up as a child in ISKCON, and he talked about his experiences and, you know, the prejudices that he faced. You know, as a black-bodied devotee growing up. And surprising to hear what some people go through. That, you know, prejudice, it's very, very deeply rooted. You know, I realized when I came to India how much Srila Prabhupada, how he didn't have even a whiff of a little smell of prejudice, you know, and how uncommon and unique that is, and how one must be so spiritually advanced to not carry any of that. Because I saw, like, when I came to India, how, you know, how much, I mean, people, you know, like Prabhupada's godbrothers or Goswamis or whatever, you know, they would see us, of course, as malechas, as we are, as we were, as kind of continue to be. And even though theoretically they can, yes, you know, we're all devotees. But like, it was very telling that I heard an interview of one of the Goswamis in Vrindavan, and someone was saying, oh, do you accept these Western Vaishnavas? And he said, yes, of course, this is Mahaprabhu's mission. And then he paused for a moment and he said, but you wouldn't want your daughter to marry one. You know, so it's like, you know, yeah, you know, they could be Vaishnavas, but I don't want to eat their food, you know. But, you know, how Srila Prabhupada was simply so free from all prejudice, so beautiful. Over years, learned to appreciate this more and more, how Srila Prabhupada was, and how incredibly rare it is to come to such a state, you know. You know, this, even though these are the basics of Bhagavad Gita, you know, Pandita Samadarshana, you know, but probably we should read that every day. Think of that verse every day, because it's not easy, you know, to see like that. But, you know, somehow we have to make that effort to see beyond the externals and to embrace diversity. I mean, that's personalism. And that's what we want to offer the world. Who was it? I think Ruminaji just gave a class on radical personalism. Yeah, that is what we want to offer to the world, but, you know, we have to start with ourselves. And we have to notice the impersonalism and prejudice in our own hearts and, you know, try to root it out. It's not easy. So this story of Murari Gupta, it's so powerful that Vrindavan Das Thakur, that he said just hearing, anyone who hears faithfully, I guess that's the key in this line, anyone who hears faithfully the story of Lord Chaitanya revealing himself as Lord Ram and hears the prayers of Murari, he will be given pure love of Krishna. So that's what we just heard. Is that an exaggeration? No. But the seed is planted, and then it's up to us to cultivate it, and, you know, eventually it will bear fruit. So then Lord Chaitanya, he also taught another very important lesson in a pastime with Murari Gupta, and he taught the principle and the importance of really fixed devotion to one's worshipable deity by showing Murari Gupta's exclusive devotion to Lord Ram. So naturally, Murari Gupta's Istadev is Ramachandra, as Hanuman. And he saw Lord Chaitanya as Ram. But Lord Chaitanya's tested him. And he said to Murari one day that, you know, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's the fountainhead of all incarnations, and he's an ocean of all devotional flavors. And the joy that one gets from worshiping Krishna, you can't get that in any other form. So you should worship Krishna. So Murari Gupta, hearing this, he promised, okay, I will. An instruction from Lord Chaitanya. So he went home at night and he thought about giving up the lotus feet of Ram, and it made him so upset. He stayed awake all night crying. It was unbearable for him. So the next day he went to Lord Chaitanya and he said, I just can't. I sold my head at the feet of Lord Ram. It causes me too much pain. But if I disobey you, that also causes me too much pain. I don't know, what can I do? I should just give up my life. So Lord Chaitanya was greatly satisfied by the exclusive devotional attitude of Murari. And he said, the love and the sacrifice that you have offered me is so overwhelming. I have no way to repay you. All I can give you is my embrace. That's all. I can give you myself. So it's quite amazing to see, you know, that even the Lord himself shows us gratitude. You know, we mentioned this earlier, how it's essential virtue for spiritual progress. That, you know, because a grateful heart, it's a fertile field for sowing the seed of bhakti. And the Lord is actually the origin of that spirit, that see how he's talking to Murari. He feels indebtedness and gratitude to his devotee. You're Hanuman, the eternal servant of Ram, Lord Chaitanya said. And he said, indeed, why should you give up worshiping his feet? So it was just a test. It was a test. And it was to show how fixed in devotion to one's Ishtadev one should be. And later in Puri, when Mahaprabhu was later a sannyasi, and he was living in Puri, this came up again. When Sri Jiva's father, Anupam, was mentioned, Rupa Goswami told Mahaprabhu that Anupam, he just, you know, he's totally dedicated to Lord Ram, and he can't give that up. And Mahaprabhu said, yeah, previously I tested Murari Gupta in the same way. And it is wonderful. That devotee who does not abandon the worshipful deity's lotus feet, he is truly glorious. And glorious too is the Lord who does not abandon his devotee. So no one can be forced to love in a certain way. It's natural that everyone loves in their own way. And everyone is different and unique and has a perfect, loving relationship with the Lord. And it has to blossom naturally. And we all have different moods. There's so many, that is a purpose, so there's so much variety, different rasas, diversity. It's the wonder of Gaudiya Vaishnavism that all these rasas exist. This is what we have to offer to the world, a variety of relationships, a variety of moods and emotions in relationship to the Supreme Lord. It's not dry and it's not impersonal. It's so special. So Lord Chaitanya, another very important lesson that was taught by Lord Chaitanya using Murari Gupta is about the importance of worship of Lord Nityananda. So once in Srivasa's house, Murari Gupta came. He came in. Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda were sitting next to each other. And Murari Gupta first fell down at the feet of Lord Chaitanya and offered his obeisances. And then Mahaprabhu said, "This is not correct. Don't you know the etiquette?" And Murari Gupta, he didn't understand. And he was just, "I'm just following my heart. I don't know." And then that night, in a dream, he saw Lord Nityananda as Balaram. And he saw him walking beside Krishna, who was Lord Chaitanya. And then he realized, oh, Nitai, he's the elder brother. And so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in his Gaudiya Bhasya, he said that Murari Gupta was also a worshipper of Balaram. And therefore, to worship the Supreme Lord without first worshiping the Guru is a mistake in sequence. So the next day, Murari Gupta came in front of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda and immediately threw himself at the feet of Lord Nityananda first. So he was, and then Lord Chaitanya was pleased. Oh, now you understand. So this is, an important for all of us, practical, that the spiritual master is the representative of Nityananda Prabhu, of Lord Balaram. And first, we offer respects to the spiritual master before trying to go ahead. There is some tendency, to try to go direct, to jump ahead, to go higher. But this pastime indicates that that is not pleasing to Lord Chaitanya. And then there's one more lesson taught through Murari Gupta. One day, his wife prepared rice with a lot of ghee on it and gave it to her husband for offering. And Murari was always absorbed in his own kind of special way of doing things. And he had this way of offering. He just threw the rice in the air. And I don't know how that worked, but that's what he did. He threw the rice in the air. "Here, my lord, please take." So then the next day, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to see Murari, and he said, I don't feel well. I've come for some medicine. And so Murari was surprised, and he examined the Lord. Imagine examining Lord Chaitanya's transcendental body. And so he asked, well, what did you eat? And he said, well, I ate lots of rice with lots of ghee. And you made me eat so much that now I have indigestion. So Murari's like, oh, he's eaten my offering. But how to treat the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Satchidananda Vigraha. How to treat him. He was a little puzzled. But then Lord Chaitanya had the solution. He said, no, give me water. That will cure me. But not ordinary water. I need the water that you drank. So then he grabbed Murari's jug of water and he drank it. And Murari fainted as this happened. And some other devotees were there. They began to cry. And Lord Chaitanya said, Murari Gupta is my greatest devotee. And anyone serving him humbly gets prema. Anyone serving him humbly gets prema. So taking the water, taking the association, this is the ultimate cure for all material disease, is the lotus feet of the pure devotee. So this is Mahaprabhu's teaching this. I'm thinking about the time. Sorry. That probably I should move on now. Just a couple of more pastimes, because I think it's going long. At one time, Murari, he started thinking about that one day the Lord is going to disappear from this world. And he just didn't want to be there for that. He really didn't want to be there for that day. And he thought it would just be too painful for him. So he got a sharp knife and he hid it in his home. And Lord Chaitanya understood his intention, and he came over and he said, Murari, hand over the knife. So Murari understood that this is not what Lord Chaitanya wants. Similarly, Sanatana Goswami also had a pastime in this way when the Lord said, your body's my body. You can't just do. I have things I want to do with your body. So, no, you can't commit suicide. And so later on, when Mahaprabhu moved to Puri, Murari Gupta, he came every year on their annual pilgrimage, and accompanied by his wife, and they would bring and feed Mahaprabhu many preparations and participate in the Rath Yatra as a member of the 3rd Sankirtan group, in which Mukunda Datta sang and Haridas Thakur danced. So his disappearance is on the full moon day of the autumn, the Sharad Purnim. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Murari Gupta is described as the 21st branch of the Chaitanya tree. And he was a storehouse of love. And the Lord's heart would melt when he saw Murari's meekness and humility. I don't know of a samadhi. I think there may be a samadhi of Murari Gupta in the 64 Samadhis park in Vrindavan. But I never heard of him going to Vrindavan. That doesn't mean he didn't go. I never heard of it. But we go in Mayapur. His home is right behind the Yoga Pit, and on Parikrama every year, we go there and classes are held there. It's a very beautiful little temple there. And to finish up this class, there's more that could be said, but we can't do everything in one go. Maybe I'll just read a little bit of it, a couple of excerpts from his book, so that we can hear his beautiful mood and how he speaks. He speaks of himself in the book in I think it's like you call it the third person. He refers to Murari Gupta. He doesn't say, I did this, I did that. He says, Murari Gupta did this and that. So I'll read just a little about how he was ordered by two different devotees, by Srivas Pandit and by Damodar Pandit, how he was ordered to write. So I'll just read that. I have that here on a screen. Let's see. So let's listen to his writing briefly. May my Lord be ever victorious, whose potencies are immense and immaculate, whose luster is glittering golden, whose eyes are as widespread as the petals of the lotus, whose beautiful arms extend down to his excellent knees, and who munificently distributes the myriad mellows of devotion while delightfully dancing. It is that very son of Jagannath who is the creator and protector of the universes and the destroyer of the universal miseries. Being fully self-controlled and all-pervading, he is able to give mankind protection in the age of Kali. Taking birth in the womb of Srimati Sachi Devi, he takes away the burden of this age and brings the process of pure devotion to himself. Murari Gupta, an associate of the Golden Lord, this is Murari speaking, Murari Gupta, an associate of the Golden Lord, presented this pure and auspicious history for the sake of the saints who forever hanker to drink through their thirsty ears glorious nectar about the Lord of widespread fame. Since his heart was enlivened by this chance for Gorakatha, Murari's eyes rolled to and fro, and he shed tears of joy. Bhakta Srivas was like the effulgent sun bringing into bloom the lotus hearts of the twice born. He instructed Murari Gupta, now the time has come. You must narrate the unique and ever-fresh history of Sri Hari. With folded hands, Sri Murari surrendered to his order, bowing repeatedly at Sri Srivas's feet. Then also to fulfill his own heart's desire, Murari described the glory of Sri Chaitanya's person, which dispels the depraved qualities of Kali Yuga. Murari, the son of a physician, then deliberated, how can one so lowly as I relate the tale of Sri Chaitanya, which is so auspicious and filled with significance, when even Brihaspati himself, the master of eloquence, surely could not do so? Still, I'm duty-bound to serve the Vaishnava's order. The opulence shining from Sri Krishna's remembrance is my perpetual and spotless illumination. Certainly, the Vaishnava's order and no other means can be fruitful. So saying, he began to narrate his history, which is nurtured by devotion to the Supreme Lord, which increases the benefits of religiosity, economic development, sense pleasure, liberation, and ultimately awards devotion to Sri Vishnu. For the pleasure of the saints, I shall speak some narrations of the Lord's pastimes. Therein, some grammatical errors may occur. At such times, may the great souls engaged in the ultimate welfare activity bless me and render my work pure, for it is on their authority that I write. I think I should end there. He was also instructed in a very beautiful way by Damodar Pandit that he should write and glorify the Lord. So also thank you to Srivas Thakur and Damodar Pandit, who encouraged Murari Gupta to write these most beautiful pastimes of the Lord. So on this day, let us remember Murari Gupta with gratitude and affection, and certainly some purification will come about by such effort. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Thank you for letting me speak. Hare Krishna.